today's speaker, I want to take a moment to thank what has been an amazing committee to work with. We've had really fantastic representation from students, staff, and faculty on this. The committee's been really engaged, has worked really hard. We've been supported by Lori Loberg, and Felicia and Tammy both have been really helpful throughout the whole process and really managed a lot of the logistics for the interview today. So let's give everyone a round of applause for their dedication to. So this morning we have our very first interview. Felicia very helpfully passed around the evaluation forms. This is a dummy copy, so we would like you to fill this out online. Felicia's already sent a link out to everyone in the Department of Entomology. If you did not receive that link, you can still access this through the CFAN's homepage, CFAN's About Leadership Searches, and you'll find the feedback. So your feedback really is essential for the committee to make good recommendations on this and the other interviewees. So it's my privilege to introduce Professor Bill Snyder, William Snyder, from Washington State. I'm a little intimidated by his CV, but I'm going to do my best to give you the highlights. So Bill has a BA degree from University of Delaware in biology, an MS degree in zoology and ecology from Clemson, and a PhD degree in entomology, and he studied with Dr. David Wise. He completed a brief postdoc at UW-Madison with Anthony Ives before joining the Washington State University faculty in 2000, and since 2010 he's been a full professor at Washington State. His research focuses on the ecological approaches to, and I'm quoting here, to find natural solutions to problems in species conservation, sustainable agriculture, and human health. And actually, I pulled a quote from your website that I thought was really poignant I want to share. Ecological problem solving can be a particularly powerful way to uncover basic knowledge about species interactions, and all of our work contributes to a fundamental understanding of how ecosystems function. Our goal is to reduce the conflict between species conservation and feeding a growing human population. So I found that really inspiring. Bill and his group have been really very successful on the research front. He currently has about $6 million in federal funding that supports his research. Throughout his career, he has raised nearly $11 million in external funds. He has been connected as a PI or co-PI on 24 grants, and most of the time he's PI on those grants, and often they include many, many co-PIs. So he has I think, good experience in herding cats, which I can attest is a useful characteristic. He lists 67 publications on his CV, many of them in prominent journals, several book chapters and books, and numerous invited lectures and seminars, and in fact he visited this department this past fall, so probably many of you participated in that. In terms of student training, he has trained 17 MS and PhD students to degree completion and currently has 5 graduate students, and many of his students have been funded through fellowships with USDA, NSF, and the Fulbright Fellowship, so really a stellar group of students. He has mentored 13 past or present postdocs and 17 undergrad researchers. He has contributed or taught courses called Insect Ecology, Applied Design and Analysis of Ecological Field Experiments, on graduate seminars, Plant Protection in Organic Systems, Complex Trophic Interactions and Biological Control, and Conservation Biological Control. He's also contributed to Extension and lists 13 Extension publications and webinars. So really a very, very productive career in many regards. Finally, he has really an extensive portfolio of service and administration activities, most relevant to the position that we're interviewing for today. Since 2012, he has served as acting chair of entomology at Washington State University. And as I understand that, that's sort of an intermittent responsibility when the department head is traveling, but it's given him the opportunity to see really the broad gamut of what it means to run an academic unit. He's been a member of the Associate Dean's Faculty Research Advisory Committee at WSU, a member of the Center for Sustaining Agriculture
I just want the laser pointer, I think.
and its leadership committee, and he's had many other service activities.
A mic, it appears.
Keep going, Jim.
I'm actually done. So, but his CV is available online. You should have seen the link. There's many, many more things to say about Bill. Open mic, anyone?
We're still working on the laser pointer, as you just heard.
So a little bit about what we asked Bill to do. We really kept the directions for this interview pretty broad. We asked him to tell us his vision for the Department of Entomology. Our hope is that he sort of integrates his past experiences, his knowledge of where the field's going, funding trends, the needs of students and stakeholders, et cetera. And are you ready?
Let's do it.
I'm going to turn it over to Bill Snyder.
So thank you for that introduction. I'll try to live up to all of that. It's been great to talk to people while I've been here. I know I have a lot more interesting meetings still coming up. As I'm standing here about to give this talk, I sent Lori the slides a couple days ago. I've had a chance to talk to people about some of the things people in the department are interested in and so on, and I'm just running through my head kind of mentally how many things I'm proposing that I've just been told are things that people definitely don't want to do. So hopefully there aren't too many of those things in here, but we'll see how it goes. And I was thinking too, while I was waiting to talk, I've never given a talk like this before, and I realized I don't think I've ever even seen a talk like this before, honestly. So I don't know what the typical format is, but I'm happy if people want it to be a little more informal and ask questions as I go through. Feel free to interrupt, or otherwise I'm going to ramble on for a half hour, 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have questions afterwards. So whatever people are comfortable with is fine with me. So just a quick outline. So what I want to talk about first is just some of my background and preparation, and really trying to put it in light of skills that I think would be useful in this position. Then talk about my vision for the future of the department and what I would see as some priorities, in particular in the first couple of years. And then I'll just not spend too much time on it, but just talk a little bit about my leadership philosophy and a couple of things I believe are effective in leadership. Okay, so Jim already talked about some of the places that I stopped, but I just wanted to spend a second to talk about some of the systems that I worked in, because a lot of the different cropping systems and types of approaches I've used really cover a lot of the breadth of this department. So for my master's at Clemson, I did some work on corn rootworm. It was kind of a soil ecology project. My PhD was doing a predator conservation in vegetable systems, so kind of a mix of basic ecology and kind of a specialty crop. In Wisconsin, I was working on aphid biocontrol and alfalfa. Then when I moved to Washington, I've done a lot of different things out there, but a couple things that are relevant here. I've done a lot of work with Colorado potato beetle and aphids on potatoes, and also more various combinations of conservation, biological control type things. And I meant to add another picture too there. We've also done some work recently with integrated livestock systems, so farmers that are including livestock in their farming operations, which has got us in this livestock parasite disease type work more recently. We've also had a diversity of approaches, so really I'm an experimental community ecologist. It's the field cages there, but with people in my lab, or oftentimes with collaborators, we've also taken a lot of complementary approaches. So we've done some kind of theory and statistical modeling. Now we're doing some GIS landscape type work. And we've also, especially in the last few years, done a lot of genomics work as those approaches have gotten cheaper and more powerful. So again, it covers the breadth of what a lot of people are doing in this department. So my current appointment right now is 70% research and 30% extension. So as part of the research, things relevant to this position, I've had grants from a lot of different sources, both federal and different industry groups. And I've supported a big group of graduate students. As Jim mentioned, it's a particular passion of mine. But then I do also have the 30% extension appointment, and I've filled a lot of different extension roles. So I've done all kinds of different field days. So everything from standing at the edge of the field with a bullhorn while growers sit on bales of hay to farm walks with particular growers. And then also I've done a lot more electronic outreach, and I'll briefly mention some exciting areas in electronic outreach that are new things that we're getting into and that I'm interested in. I don't have a teaching appointment, but I also have developed a few courses, and lately in my role as sort of a guest lecturer, I've gotten more interested in kind of what I would consider to be modern teaching approaches, which is just where you have more student-led learning, so not just lecturing, but having students break into groups and tackle particular problems, which I think everybody, I don't have to convince anybody here, that's a pretty effective way to teach, and it's different than when I was an undergrad. I've noticed from talking to people and looking at the website that it's a particular point of pride with this department that the graduate students are large in number and kind of great in their success and have gone on to roles in academics, industry, government, and so on. So I just wanted to reinforce, again, that I've had a big group of postdocs and graduate students. Many of them have gone into academic positions of all different types at kind of research universities, big and small, teaching colleges and other things. And a couple at Big Ten schools, too. This one might look familiar. Also, Sean Steffen is at University of Wisconsin. So it's been kind of a mixed bag of the people I've put in Big Ten schools. So Sean's pretty strong. You can't be winning on all of them. Okay, so just to summarize what all this means, the importance of this, it's just that I've worked in a lot of different crops that are important up here. So things like corn, alfalfa, potato, and a variety of other specialty crops. So as far as the breadth of different ag industry groups that I might interact with, I have at least some experience with some of their problems. Also, again, the diversity of topics that I've worked on spans a fair bit of what's done in this very diverse department. So agricultural and veterinary entomology, a little bit of molecular biology, although I would definitely not say that I'm a molecular biologist. And lots of ecology, biological control, and integrated pest management of a whole variety of different crops and pests. And again, the research approaches, field theory and molecular also is quite broad. And with having the split that I have a fair bit of experience in outreach in addition to research and teaching. So hopefully that would put me in a position to be able to understand problems from a lot of different types of appointments and positions, descriptions, and things across the department. So leadership experience, again, to review some of the things were already mentioned in the introduction. So I've had a fair number of federal grants. The really important thing is that most of those, especially the group that I have right now, are really broadly interdisciplinary grants, and I'll give you just one quick example of what that looks like here in a second. And a lot of them, so not just moving across disciplines outside of entomology, so plant pathology, soil science, many other things, but also a lot of them have involved close industry collaboration. I think when I started this, I was a little bit intimidated probably with trying to approach industry groups and working with them, but I've gotten more experience and just more expertise in interacting with those folks, and I found it to be a really valuable relationship. I've had a large and diverse lab group who have gone on to do well, and also I've been serving as the acting chair, as was already mentioned. So it's given me a chance to just sit in a lot of meetings and learn a lot about how administration sees things that sometimes are a little mysterious to you whenever you're an individual faculty member, but it gives you a different perspective of what's their thought process and all the things like revenue streams and things that we like to be blissfully unaware of, but that keep the lights on and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I don't want to talk about the research part of this, but I just want to talk about the structure of this project. So this is one of the large grants we have. It's a specialty crops USDA grant that's looking at vectors of the zebra chip pathogen of potato. And this is one of these big regional projects that has a lot of different disciplines. And I just want to talk to you about some of that diversity and give you sort of an idea of my experience working with these diverse groups, just to reinforce what I just said. So within this project we have, I forget what it is, it's 15 or 16 co-PIs, so I was thinking it probably comes close to the number of faculty that are in this department. It's people across all different states, and it's people with really different types of appointments. So some people are almost pure research people, some people are 100% extension. Again, they're geographically dispersed, and we even have some kind of oddball disciplines that are in here. We have a meteorologist, a sociologist, and an economist. So it's given me some experience. I had an earlier project that had some of these social science aspects to it, and it was a little bit of a trick to getting people from such different backgrounds to really talk and communicate with one another. So that's been an interesting experience. We have some USDA people, lots and lots of growers that we interact with. And then again, importantly, we have industry people that are really involved in the project. So the two people I have there are involved in the day-to-day operations, and then we have a stakeholder advisory board that we meet with every year, and they review everything that we're doing in the project. and they provide feedback, which has been really interesting and really quite helpful. Okay, I want to kind of transition now to talking about this department and start with kind of, I guess, it's good news first approach. Lots of good news. So just to outline what I see as kind of a couple of existing strengths of this department that just need to be built upon. So first, as you all know, the department has a really long and proud history of over 125 years. That's really been well documented, and it's interesting to read through all that on the website. So there's a lot of history that goes with the department and a lot of pride that goes with everything that's been accomplished. I think right now it's a really strong group of faculty. So there's a good coverage of broad subject areas and critical mass. Kind of importantly, there don't really seem to be gaping holes right now in the grad curriculum. A lot of smaller entomology departments can really struggle even to offer basic core courses. And so at least as things stand right now, it's actually pretty solid, which is really encouraging. Award-winning faculty, MacArthur Fellow, and so on, so a lot of prestige that comes with that. It's a good mix of applied and fundamental research, so my interest in my own work is in balancing out those two, and it's good to see that breadth from more fundamental research all the way to very applied things that lead to good interactions with ag groups and other parts of industry. So it's a really solid faculty at this point. The students, as Jim mentioned, I was out here just in October, had a great meeting with the students. You can just tell the people are really, really enthusiastic, care a lot about the department. I was thinking about the number 4 national ranking. I don't know what's the chicken and the egg there, if it's that high because good students come here, or good students come here because the ranking is so high, but still it really is a really strong group of students. Consistently gaining jobs after they graduate, as I already mentioned, and really do seem to be, at least according to the internet, seem to be really a cohesive group that's winning lots of awards and are good ambassadors to the public, as shown in these pictures that I stole from your website without attribution. So it was really great. It really did seem that it was a cohesive unit, which is really, really important. So some great facilities. The B Lab. Everyone here has been to the B Lab, I'm sure, as I was earlier. It's a pretty amazing facility. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen a nicer entomology building anywhere that I've been. Traveling around the country, beautiful, shiny new building. I thought the quarantine facility also is quite nice. So there are some nice facilities, as you're aware. Maybe I won't belabor that point. Okay. So other advantages, I don't have to spend a lot of time on this. You know this. Minnesota's a really good school. There is involvement in these important undergrad degree programs, plant science and food systems. So there's some teaching involvement in undergrads. An attractive big city environment, but close to ag and natural areas, so it's a little bit of everything. I mean, I think people I know that have lived here really, really love it, and I think it's an attractive place that students want to go to. Okay, so challenges. Ooh, that got loud all of a sudden when I got to challenges. So challenges on the horizon. So when you look at the other top 10 entomology departments, as I did, and probably many of you have too, you can see that there are a lot of other entomology departments that are on the move, that are in the top 10. You can look at places like UC Riverside that's hired, I don't even know how many people. They just hired a couple of our best people from Washington State. They're hiring people, all the time. So, other departments are not standing still. There might be some demographic realities amongst the faculty where people need to start thinking about, what's the next 125 years, or at least the next 25 years of the department are going to look like. And that's going to take planning and consensus amongst everybody to be able to compete for resources in a tough environment. The facilities, as you know, are not consistently high quality, and there may need to be some movement on that. And we know, too, that tuition is an increasing part of university budgets. So as state funding has kind of tanked, universities have generally made that up with tuition dollars, because that's the one thing that can be grown, other than maybe grant dollars. So as that's become an important revenue stream, it's really important for departments like entomology that don't have an undergrad degree to start to think about getting over the obstacles to try to get more involved in undergrad teaching as best as possible. Okay, so what's the plan? So I just want to say, I just want to throw out some ideas. I think it's really important for anyone that's in a head position that you really want kind of grassroots generation of ideas and make sure that people are really supporting everything that you want to do. But I just want to throw out some of my ideas of what I could see as a vision for this department as kind of a way to start a discussion along those lines. So here's how I always have looked at entomology, is what the role that it can play in a college like CFANS, where there's a lot of diverse things going on. And I think, you can make a credible argument that entomology can be and should be at the very center of a lot of these different diverse disciplines. So, areas that get a lot of attention oftentimes are things like plant sciences and plant molecular sciences. There's also animal sciences, human sciences. There's a lot of things going on in the college. And I think a real important thing that entomology departments have to achieve is to try to be at the center point of all those many links. I just want to spend a little bit of time going through kind of what I mean by that. But I think it's also that thing that's the greatest strength of the entomology department can often be almost a weakness. So, insects are really important to the plant sciences, right? Because we are interested in insects oftentimes because they eat plants or they pollinate plants, but they're not actually plants themselves, right? So maybe insects fit into animal sciences because they are actually animals in that case, but they aren't cows and pigs and chickens and livestock animals, so they're not exactly a perfect fit with that group either. People often are really interested in insects, for better or for worse, but insects ideally aren't people unless you're in some kind of crazy science fiction movie. Entomology has this role of linking all these different areas but not fitting perfectly within any of them. And I think that's been maybe a big challenge in my mind to entomology departments, again, when it's so competitive for resources. So it's kind of a long slide, but like I sort of mentioned, it's really this greatest strength can be the greatest weakness, because when there is an initiative, molecular plant sciences or whatever, entomology really needs to be proactive to make sure they're included in that. Other examples, things like sustainable agriculture, oftentimes are thought of as more of an agronomic thing and not so much an entomology thing, but farmers are managing insects in all different kinds of systems. So the trick is to really be engaged with the college and make sure that people know the role that you can fill within each of those different kind of disciplinary areas. Okay, so I just wanted to set out some priorities. So for this department, some things that are kind of low-hanging fruit, I guess, and the planning end of things. So I think the department actually now is working on the strategic plan. And really the critical part of the strategic plan, I think, is going to be the hiring plan. So hearkening back to the demographic realities, it's going to be important to really start thinking about what the department should look like for the next generation. It's a really, really important discussion. And I think one way to do that could be to look at other top 10 departments. You can see there's really a diversity of ways that some of those departments have gone about ensuring that future. That could be interesting discussion points, and sort of look at models that seem to fit most what this department would want to do. I think it's really important to be open to interdisciplinary initiatives. Just from talking to people, it seems here, like probably most universities, oftentimes some opportunity arises for a cluster hire or something like that, and again, you want to be represented and be there to show that entomology could fit into that and should be a key part of it. Again, but even beyond all these things, what I think is really probably the most important part of the whole thing is that whatever the plan is ultimately, that the department kind of comes together, achieves consensus, or as I say, or pretend it did. So, sometimes these are pretty heated discussions. People don't all get what they want, but I think once you leave that faculty meeting, it's really important and valuable for basic self-preservation to agree that, hey, that discussion was in a closed room, and now we're going to go forward and all act as one to promote the department within the plans that we all worked on together. So again, we had an interesting discussion about this morning. There seem to be sort of two ways that entomology departments have reshaped themselves. So the one is the maintaining the breadth of coverage. So sort of making sure that all areas of entomology are covered by at least one person. The other way that some of the top 10 departments have gone is in choosing particular focal areas and trying to achieve critical mass and just having a little bit more focus to the hiring plan. We had a discussion today. I think there's strong feeling about the first of these two options, having the breadth. I lean a little bit more towards the second one of these. I think there's some common ground that could be found there, but I think the risk when you are always trying to maintain breadth as your main focus is that each position that comes open is sort of a whole separate conversation that you're starting over again. If you can have some kind of a clusters where there's some overlap between the group of positions that you're trying to put together, I think it's a little easier to argue that, just one position isn't going to completely meet all of your needs. And I don't.
Because you said we may interrupt, Mayor, and that's
Yeah.
actually a big problem that we have to convey this to the administration who makes a final decision where they do not agree that we should be building on our strength, but they say, oh, well, you already have somebody here. You don't need another person because they don't understand how important it is to put more money where there is already strength.
Yeah.
Right now, we are losing positions that are really entomology positions to other divisions because of exactly that. And
Yeah, I mean, I think point being there, is that all of this is really hard, right? Because there's a lot of different departments in this college, and it's a really strong university, and everybody has a good argument for their positions. I think, there can be some overlap between these two approaches that you can kind of get to a sweet spot where, you're achieving some of both. So maybe it's packaged in such a way that you're highlighting the complementarity amongst the different positions that you're filling within a group, but you're also making sure that they are filling key areas that you don't want to lose. So I don't think there's any easy answers to any of this. I think it's all important. It's really important to be engaged in the college, be there in a lot of meetings where decisions are being made, and being able to reinforce what entomology has to contribute. So that's sort of my last point, I guess, is that, I think the unity of vision and really working through it and coming up with an argument that makes sense and everyone agrees on, I think is really important. Just being in the room and being active in the college, I think is really important. Okay, so with this sort of framework of trying to stress the links with other types of specialty areas within the college, there's a couple different ways you can devise hiring plans of a couple of positions maybe that would really strengthen each one of these links. So just some examples. Plant-insect interactions or insect vectors of plant pathogens. And we were talking about this a little bit this morning in the committee meeting. And also some of these could easily lead in sort of a genomics-y type of an area. It seems like there's a lot of interest amongst the students here and the faculty in building up some more expertise. Again, when there's hires in molecular plant biology, oftentimes those are other departments, but really should be part of entomology because there's a lot of interesting molecular biology that goes on when insects interact with plants or when they interact with pathogens. So I think that could be a way to fill an area in the department that needs filled, but also strengthen links with other types of departments. Just following on that same theme, something similar could be done with animal sciences. So there's a lot of interest right now, of course, in pathogens vectored by mosquitoes, for example. A lot of that work, again, is quite molecular. So if part of the goal is to fill in molecular expertise within the department, this could be a way to pitch interactions with other units, and also just a way to be a little bit prepared with if there are interdisciplinary cluster hire opportunities that people have thought about it. Another possibility is to look at things like Drosophila, which are model systems that have applications across a broad group of animals. That could be something like an insect genomics position. Okay, last but not least, so I do realize that pollinators aren't actually humans, but another area where I think entomology can be well placed is that there are some entomological issues that get a lot of attention from the public. So pollinators is a really obvious one right now, but we all know also that periodically emerald ash borer or soybean aphid or something like that shows up, and suddenly there can be opportunities that maybe people would not have seen. Just because insects, I think, in a way, attract more attention from the public sometimes than things like bacteria or something. Sorry, nothing personal. Insects are very charismatic.
unless you get sick, then you pay attention to bacteria.
That's true, but I don't think there's any bacteria on this endangered species list or anything like the bumblebee. Maybe. Okay, the second priority, as I mentioned, for a department that doesn't have an undergrad teaching program, it's really important to look at every possible option for getting more undergrad credit hours within the department. And so we talked this morning about some of the obstacles that have to be overcome, and those are never small. But it seemed like there's pretty broad agreement across the department that this is something that would be worth putting a lot of effort into and trying to fight through. So again, as the universities move to this model where more and more of the revenue is coming from tuition, if you're not involved in teaching, you're in a delicate spot. So it seems like there's the energy behind it and the interest to try to find some kind of a way forward. In the department I'm in now, teaches a couple of these science for non-science major courses that are bringing, I think a couple of them have 200 students. It means that the department has one of the biggest proportions of undergrad credit hours across the whole college, even though we're quite a small department. So if you can just get in the door and offer these courses can become quite popular, but obviously there's obstacles because it might be perceived that you're stealing credit hours from other colleges and so on. So it can be difficult to get there, but could be really valuable. Okay, build involvement is another thing that I'm interested in. Just a couple ideas here. So I know there's ongoing citizen science efforts within the department, but obviously that's been an area that's getting a lot of attention to really get people in the public, general public involved. And in a big city, or pair of cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, there's lots of people interested in the environment, and there could be a way to bring more of those people in and get them more involved with the department and know that it's here. When I did my sabbatical year at Penn State, they had one of these insect expos where they had just kind of a big standalone event about insects. If anyone's ever been to Penn State, it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And they had absolutely thousands of people there. I could not believe it. So I think something like this could be really, really popular in this area where there are a lot of people with environmental interest to bring them in. You know, kids like to hold bugs and all that kind of stuff. I know this grad students do a lot of that already, but it could be formalized, could be made a bigger event. The last one that I think that would be a good idea is to do some kind of a stakeholder advisory board, and I'll kind of blow that out just to talk about that in a little more detail. I've been involved in organizing these, one of these right now for the department I'm currently in. So the idea here is to basically kind of poll the faculty, get some names of some people that are in industry or politically connected or donors to the university. For example, we got one guy to join our stakeholder board who goes fishing with the football coach. So the most powerful person in the university is the football coach, right? And he does that because he's a big donor. So to get those people involved with the department. So what that can give the department is you can get insight about non-academic jobs and trends and have them help shape some of your undergrad curriculum, maybe even place some of your graduate students. But from a selfish perspective, what I think is really helpful is that we found that oftentimes they can reach out to administration in a way that academic people can't. So when you're a dean, right, there's a list of 500 people outside of your door with their hat in their hand. They need some kind of resources, and I think it's sometimes tough to kind of break through all that noise. But I've found sometimes an important donor, if you have a particular problem, as long as you're not calling this in too often, can really explain it to somebody. And I think it means more just because someone who's, has their own business or whatever is a very, very busy person. The fact that they would take the time to help out your department, I think carries a lot of weight versus, being just another professor that's like, please give me money, help me, kind of a thing. So I think it can be really effective. Another thing that can be important with this then is to have a biannual on-campus meeting where administration comes in, you meet with your advisory board of stakeholders, kind of get their input, and you make sure that administration's involved in that and let the stakeholders be some of your advocate in behalf of the department. So I think that can be effective. Okay, space. Put this one last. This is the trickiest one. Everybody knows about this building. I have been here now a couple times, and I've heard several mentions of the building. The building's not the greatest building. This is not a simple thing to fix, but again, this has to become part of long-range planning. I think the concern here is not so much, somebody like me that would come here, but more so as the department faces this need to recruit junior faculty and bring in people that are doing really exciting research that are going to bring in a lot of money. It gets that much more difficult if the space is just not as the high quality as some other places where they might have offers from too. So it gets to be a bit of a survival issue. I don't know if I said that delicately enough. Okay, just a few more things. So the graduate experience, it sounds like this is already happening. So Edwin, who's here somewhere, Edwin's on the search committee. So this is great. This is something I've always thought was a really good idea, is to include graduate students on all important committees, to have graduate students in the faculty meeting. I think it's great to get that perspective, especially when it's such a good group of students. And I think it's really good training. I did this when I was a graduate student and still went into academics after I saw what happens behind those closed doors. But it was really interesting, just to get that professional experience, I think, too. So it's good, kind of works both ways. I think it's good to do some kind of yearly assessment of graduate experience with a survey, an anonymous survey, so that you can really learn what is working and what's not working in the graduate program. And you could probably do the same with the undergraduate. I know you do course evaluations at the end of the semester, but especially for grad students, there are a lot of other things about the grad student experience I don't think would be captured in those. Another thing I'm interested in is grant writing experiences and training. So USDA now has these pre-doc fellowships, which there are a fair number of these things floating out there, and had some success working with students to get their grants up to a higher quality, and so that they can be competitive in those competitions. And it's a great jumping off point for your career if you can get one of these awards. Okay, the last thing I wanted to mention is sort of a new project. I've been interested recently in new approaches to outreach. So electronic outreach in particular. Electronic outreach is not really a new thing, right? I'm sure everybody in this room has done many, many websites that report some finding or another or some kind of outreach objective. But what I'm seeing lately in a couple projects that I'm working on are chances for sort of a next level of depth in your electronic outreach. Just one example, I have a grant right now where we're looking at the impact of songbirds on insects on farms. And through that, we got connected with some people at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which has a huge citizen science effort, probably many of you are familiar with. One of their products they developed was this one. It's called Yard Map or Habitat Network. And what it was designed for is individual homeowners go in there and you kind of upload a picture of your yard or whatever, and then you map out where the bushes are, where the bird bath is, and so on. And it sort of gives you a little bit of information about what other habitat management techniques you might use. It's not really science-based, but more sort of mostly common sense type things. So with our project, we're generating a lot of information about what farm features actually encourage beneficial versus pest birds, things like starlings, what insects all the birds are eating, and so on, a lot of really useful information. So we're talking to them about is trying to modify this to make it a tool that farmers could use so they could map out what's going on their farm, they could put in their exact habitat characteristics, and they could get out science-based information on what specific things they could do based on their landscape structure to encourage more beneficial birds and deter pest birds from coming in. So I think it's really a different level than sort of a website where you're reading information, but it's much more interactive. Okay, so some priorities. What I thought would be priorities in year one, I'd like to not have, it's probably a million things you come up with to do, but try to come up with a few things to focus on in each year to make sure that you have good targets that can be met and so on. I'd be interested in just meeting with everyone, it's kind of standard half-hour meeting, and just get some ideas of what they think is working in the department and what they would want as new initiatives. Then, of course, as I already mentioned, organizing committees, or I guess there already is one at this point, but working towards finalizing the strategic plan and having a lot of focus on the hiring plan for all the reasons I already discussed. Initiate that discussion of undergrad teaching expansion, which I learned a little bit more of the details of some of the obstacles, so I have a little bit better focus on what that would actually entail, and it seems like a lot of those discussions are already underway. And start thinking about the stakeholder advisory board that I'd mentioned. Okay, priorities for year two. So I'm just going to go with the idea that the new hiring plan was very well received by administration. So we're going to already be beginning to welcome the new faculty at that point. Okay, then full implementation of year one strategic planning initiatives. One thing I like within any kind of planning is to come up with a series of specific action items or targets, and then who's going to be the lead on that, and then a series of benchmarks that you do periodically at faculty meeting or in other venues, so that everyone, as you know, is super, super busy. It's really easy to have big ideas at a strategic planning meeting, but then it's harder to really stick with it and follow through. So to try to make sure that those things are actually being initiated and done. Probably hold the first on-campus meeting of the Stakeholder Advisory Board. I just like to do that every other year because I think if you do it every year and as people start to burn out and you start to see interest kind of declining, so I think every other year is a better way to do it so people stay engaged. And then maybe start thinking about the first Insect Expo. Priorities for year three, more new faculty. And then full implementation of the year two strategic planning initiatives. The point here being that I like to look at strategic planning as not kind of a one-year exercise, and then you don't think about it again for the next 5 or 6 years or whatever, but to try to have a series of initiatives that kind of build on those initiatives, and again with timelines and trying to keep everybody on task. Okay, hold the Insect Expo, which will be a huge success. And then the critical part of any position like this, all the problems that no one told me about until it was too late. Not here, of course. That's just other places that would happen. Okay, I just want to wrap up with a couple ideas of some central concepts of my leadership philosophy. Okay, this was a dangerous picture to find. If you do a Google search for like Summer of Love, it's almost impossible to find a picture you can put up in front of them. I'll be in HR before I even got offered a job. Okay, so just a couple key points. So first of all, just consensus is so important, as I've mentioned throughout the presentation. You know, getting to the point where people all are able to have their opinions heard, everyone talks out what they want to do, and you just look for those intermediate points where maybe everyone's not getting all of what they want, but people are getting enough of what they want that they're happy. And I think that's kind of my, with all these discussions, it's usually where I find myself. I like to look for those points where, you know, everyone is pretty darn close to agreement. So I think that's an important principle. Shared governance is really important. So it's a pretty big, pretty diverse department. There's just no way realistically that a department head is going to be able to do, you know, everything, or that you'd even want a department head to be making a lot of decisions. It really needs to be a group effort and very much ground up. I think it's really important that when you establish a committee to take on teaching or whatever else it might be, you know, that you really are pretty much going to accept, you know, once the faculty have agreed on those conclusions, that the head's going to stay out of the way. Okay, complete transparency is important. You know, I've seen through the years, usually with departmental budgets, it's oftentimes is not really a huge amount of money that's sloshing around, but a lot of frustration can come in the department when people don't understand why resources are going to one place versus another. I think the way to avoid that is to just have kind of an open budget, make all the spending decisions based on the strategic plan that everyone agreed on, make sure it's discussed, make sure after the fact people know where the money went. So it's just very, very open. It's not sort of a secret pool of money that people always imagine. I think it's probably being much larger than it really is. So just that people really know why the resources are being used the way they are. Okay, I think pragmatism is important. So within the strategic planning, you know, you're often going to have a really specific hiring plan, but then we know too that sometimes there are just opportunities that arise because a new pest is invaded or there's a new hiring initiative. And I think it's good to remain flexible without being chaotic, but willing to take advantage of opportunities, even if it means kind of changing your vision of the department somewhat. And last but not least, just planning and inclusion. Again, as I've been saying throughout, having everybody involved, making sure that as soon as an issue arises that faculty know about it, people have plenty of chance to get involved in decision making, I think is really important, and to be heard and so on. Okay, so just to wrap up, so why do I want to do this? You know, the things that were attractive to me about this department is at first, you know, really it's the number 4 entomology department in the country. So there's really a lot of strengths here, and I've gone through many of those existing strengths with the grad students and so on. But what I think is interesting about this position is that there are these challenges, in particular the demographic challenge, the building challenge. I don't think I'm really a status quo kind of person, so I just like the idea that, you know, there is going to be a need for some effective leadership to get the department through and on to the next number of decades. There will be an opportunity to recruit and mentor new faculty. I'm involved in doing some of that in my current department, and I think it's really rewarding and is a fun thing. And again, it's a way to just kind of contribute to the future and to the history of this great and strong department that's been around for quite a long time. Okay, so we all know that in this modern world, you know, there's a lot of competition for resources, and a lot of times administrators, as I've mentioned, are facing requests from all over the place, so I think it's important to have kind of a central message that you can relate and that everyone can agree on, that your box elder bug can land on. So entomology matters. It goes again, you know, it's a really strong department, one of the best departments in the world, okay? Research, teaching, and extension are all at the center of what the college does, and beyond that, it really links all these different areas and really helps facilitate interdisciplinary collaboration. So it's not just passively going along for the ride, but it's actually an important bridge between these different units. We have strong ties to the stakeholders. That would be regularly demonstrated to everyone in administration, because we'll have this active and involved stakeholder advisory board. And of course, the things that are always going to matter, no matter what you do, those research dollars, which are already quite high, teaching, and so on. So all those important things to make sure that we have all that information available in a readily digestible form and ready to hand it out to anyone who's interested in seeing it. Okay, so that's all I've got. I think I've got a little bit of time here for questions, so thanks everybody for your attention. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Bill. What questions? We've got about we've got about 15 minutes, and then we need to vacate the room for a class. But we've got time for questions.
Hey, so I was really interested in your talk about the demographic realities. What has been your approach so far in your career to overcoming the diversity issues that science commonly faces, things like unconscious bias and the leaky pipeline?
Yeah, so I think, the question was how to deal with those many unconscious biases that have limited diversity in entomology in particular. So a couple things that I've done in my own program, which has been quite diverse. So I myself don't come from an academic family, to say the least. I grew up in just a blue-collar neighborhood in Allentown, Pennsylvania. My parents didn't do four-year college degrees. So one thing I've been pretty involved in is just being aware whenever you see applications. So oftentimes people that are working their way through school don't have a lot of glamorous internships and things like that because they were working. So just to kind of be aware of that and kind of give those a boost up. Within my own lab group, just to try to really be aware of, sometimes there are people who can kind of dominate the conversation just to make sure, and be really consciously aware to make sure that people aren't talking over one another or cutting each other off. That there is a chance for everybody to have input and to weigh in on all the major decisions. So those are just a couple things. I guess my approach so far has been kind of lead by example as best I can.
There's got to be more.
Yeah.
Scientific coordination. Okay, so I'm an undergraduate student, I'm a minor student, and we have no undergraduate major, which is regrettable. When you talk about expanding undergraduate education, we have one class right now taught by Ann Fallon that is pretty open to other people in different majors. Are you looking to actually have an undergraduate major or to just make more undergraduate courses available to other people in different colleges?
Yeah, so the question is basically how to expand the undergraduate major. So in my meeting today with the search committee, I learned a little bit more of the on-the-ground realities about this. So it appears that an entomology undergrad major is really unlikely. So then I think you're looking at getting over some of the obstacles to where people in other colleges have greater access to getting credit for taking classes in entomology. So where they're actually filling core requirements and not just being electives, or just getting the people that are, kind of peripherally involved or maybe really passionate about it, but they can't really take that as one of their primary courses to meet their course requirements. This can be really successful, like I kind of mentioned, at the university I'm at now, we really have just a lot of undergrad students in some of the classes. So it's kind of insects in society, insects in human health. They're really interesting classes. They get a lot of enthusiasm from the undergrads. Lots and lots of enrollments, and I think really enjoyed. And you just see things, I run into people all over the country, like, oh, you're at Washington State. Oh, I had Rich Zach's class, which is one of these intro classes, best class I ever took. So if you can just get past those institutional barriers, you can really get some big enrollments. But, it takes a lot of effort to power through the kind of bureaucracy and make that happen.
Thank you for your talk. So I heard you talk about the importance of interdisciplinary work, but I also heard you talk about the importance of bringing more into the Department of Entomology. And I think there's a little bit of a tension there, right? Like if you want to work interdisciplinary, maybe the kind of kudos of doing something goes to a different department instead of coming to entomology. And I'm thinking specifically a little bit about your insect fair, because I'm in the monarch lab, and that is part of conservation biology, and we do a big insect ecology fair every year. And I think the potential to cooperate would be awesome. But then how do you deal with that tension of who gets the credit, so to speak, or with coursework and funding and all of that sort of give and take?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, that's the great question of all time, huh? So, how to be interdisciplinary without losing your identity. And I guess that's why I kind of lean towards the type of model that I put up there where, the importance of entomology really is its links with some of those other units so that it does span those units. I've seen it oftentimes entomology people are brought up into administration and things just because I think they can so easily move across those different disciplines. But I don't think there's any simple answer to how you resolve that tension because I think it's just always going to be there. It's the nature of entomology for whatever reason. The entomologists seem to be just particularly good at moving between basic and applied, working in all these different types of systems. And as I said, it's the greatest strength can also be, it's kind of Achilles' heel. So I don't really know that I have, some really, short answer. It's the ongoing struggle of entomology, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to add on. I don't know where the microscope is here. Okay, so particularly this interdisciplinary subject, what it has actually resulted in us is for, we feel this being the medical entomology, one of the medical entomology groups in the department, including myself and Ann Fallon, is that other disciplines like people in public health, people in veterinary medicine, in the medical school realize how important entomology is, and then they take the piece of the cake away from us because they're helped by the administration who say, oh yeah, they have a need because they don't have such a person, so let's give them access to this position. And then we are basically being cannibalized and we are being, punished for collaborating. And so we are being bled to death. And so there is a real problem for us now. Do we want to stick our necks out again and collaborate? Yes, we do, but we don't like to receive all those bumps on the head all the time.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is, as you saw, it was the center point really of my presentation. I mean, I think that is kind of the grand challenge of all entomology departments, is how to have that breadth not just almost swallow you up and get sent to all the far corners of the college or the university or whatever. I don't think there's any easy answer. I think the only thing you can do is, be well organized, be unified, be really active in the college, and just directly demonstrate your role. And again, I think the stakeholder group can really help a lot so that they can also advocate on your behalf and make some of those arguments. But it's no way around hard work, in my mind, to do it, and kind of constant vigilance.
That would be your job.
I know, but that's a good example of the kind of job that the head cannot do by his or herself. I mean, it really needs to be a group effort where everyone's on board, or it's just not going to fly. And that's just the reality of it, I think.
Question back there, and then I'll come up.
When you were talking about
Wait just a moment. Here, folks online.
in reference to your leadership philosophy, you put a heavy emphasis on consensus and shared governance. At what point does the department head make the decisions and be responsible for them? Because when there's discussion back and forth, the committee, obviously, it can't be a majority type thing. Otherwise, what do we need a department head for?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, that the role of the department head is specifically, to try to guide the conversations in such a way that you get as close to consensus as you can. And I mean, there probably are going to be those cases where, it's 5-4 or something, and it's not the good agreement that you would like to have in the end. And I think then at that point, it's really the role of the faculty to kind of be adults and, realize that this is what the majority in this case agreed on, and, not sink the whole ship of entomology by holding on to a grudge about this one particular issue. But I think, I really honestly think that those cases, it's not so super common. I mean, I think there's most things probably across the department that most people would agree upon. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's any kind of magic answer. I mean, I guess you're right. At some point, the head does need to make the decision, but I think the head's job is to try to set up a situation where you're hardly ever, making any kind of heavy-handed decision, that you really put in the effort to try to get the group as close to agreement as you can.
Thanks for your talk. During my time at Mississippi State University, the Department of Entomology was conjoined with plant pathology, molecular biology, and biochemistry. I have my own bias towards that I won't say, but do you view conjoining departments as one way to maybe integrate some of these collaborations, or how would you view that and the idea of joining departments?
Yeah, so these mergers, I'm generally forced. I don't know of too many that are voluntary, but maybe there have been some. I don't know really of any cases where that's made any of the individual units or the collective unit better. I mean, maybe after a couple decades, like that happened at Berkeley, where they were the #1 entomology department, I think, in the world, and they got forcibly merged, and things were kind of askew for a long, long time. I mean, maybe they've rebuilt by now, but I just don't know of any cases where that actually makes things better for the units individually, collectively, does service to the college. So I've just empirically, I've not seen evidence of that being successful. What almost always happens in almost every case I can think of is there's 9 different units, and there's one of those units that gets merged that has one more person than the next biggest unit, and in 10 years they're all whatever the first unit was. So there's like 9 plant pathologists and 8 entomologists. In a couple years, it's 15 plant pathologists and entomologies.
I would tell exactly the opposite story.
Really?
In terms of numbers, entomology outweighing plant path.
Oh, well, then, wait a minute now. Now, this is a different story. Thank you for bringing that up. So I would recommend a merge with Plant Path. Thank you. It's so good you were on the search committee.
Other questions for Bill?
Hey, first off, as a fellow UD grad, go Hens. Okay, but on a more serious
There's
note.
not a whole lot of blue hen pride out there, so good for you.
Hey, we got 2. So,
I was just back. My sister lives near Newark. I was just back there visiting. I just noticed. I walked around for an hour and a half before I saw a single person on campus with a University of Delaware T-shirt.
there's some
really
pride
unusual.
in there.
It's like a point of pride
You talked
to not
quite a
have
bit
pride.
about shaping the future of the program, and specifically about implementing programs from other top 10 universities.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on what some of those plans are, specifically ones you'd want to see here?
Yeah, I mean, there really are different models, and I think that's one that really has to be a group discussion. So you look at some of them. So I went to University of Kentucky for my PhD. They're hanging on there. I think they're number 10. They're very much, it's a pretty small department. They're very much a breadth, kind of a one of each model. Whereas if you look at something like Penn State, I mean, I think that Penn State has been much more in clusters. So I think they have kind of 3 clusters, arguably. They have kind of an agroecology cluster, a chemical ecology, and then a sort of mosquito vector disease cluster. I mean, I'm a little bit leery of the kind of one of each because of what I said, because I think that, then like it's sort of reintroducing your argument about what you're trying to build in the department anytime that someone retires and needs replaced or whatever, because it's a totally different discipline you didn't talk about last time. I mean, I did think one thing that I liked about what Penn State has done is that they had an opportunity because of some cluster hires in disease ecology to add a bunch of mosquito people, and that was something they didn't do a whole lot of. And now that's another whole cluster that's kind of broadened what they were able to do. So it didn't really come at a cost, I don't think, to breadth. I think it probably increased breadth. But I know, too, that example does highlight some of the problems. So some of the positions were half biology, and then that was, I think, it's sometimes hard for people to get on board with that. Why are we helping biology? Whatever. Anyway, so I mean, those seem like kind of the 2 major models. So maybe picking one or just a few kind of focal areas for clusters, or having breadth. I don't know. I mean, maybe there are some ways to do a little bit of both. So like I was saying, kind of spin it a little bit as being a cluster hybrid, making sure that the components of that are also covering the bases in grad courses or whatever. So, but I mean, it is a little bit scary. I mean, some places, like I was saying, like Riverside has hired so many people. I mean, some of these top 10 departments really are on the move. So I think it's not a time where you want to be sitting by doing nothing. I mean, some of those departments are definitely trying to move up.
Okay, we are almost out of time. We can take one more question if we've got it. Is there anything online? Okay.
So one of the major constraints that faculty feel for advancing their programs is actually tied to the students and the quality of the students, and that rolls over into support for students. Do you have any innovative ideas how to, from where you come from and your experience, how to have some novel, unique, not yet tried, but worth going for ways of increasing available support for graduate students, either those that are coming in or those who are in a program and are in danger of falling between the cracks because funding to the PI ends?
Yeah, so different ways to fund students. A couple things. So if you can grow that undergraduate teaching, then that can bring TAs with it. So that can be one way. I don't know exactly how TAs are distributed here. But that can be one option. So a couple other things. So these new USDA grant programs that I mentioned where students can support themselves. Obviously NSF has had programs like that for a long time that are really competitive, but USDA has a number of awards, and that can be a way to support students. Write interdisciplinary grants can be another way. And I think also, it can be a good thing to go to some of the stakeholders if you have a successful and engaged stakeholder advisory board, then some of them might be interested in supporting students. So I'd heard MGK, the local insecticide company, I think they're interested in supporting students in this department. So I think they do actually already support some students. So those are some of the things that can be grown. It's another case where I don't think none of those are easy answers. I don't think there's too many stones that are left unturned in ways to support more students, but those are just a couple ideas.
Great. Well, Bill, thank you very much for a very informative seminar. It was a lot of fun for us.
Thank you.
So again, a plea to go online, fill out the evaluation form. Your voice really does matter in this process. Finally, the schedule's been distributed. There are lots of opportunities to meet with Bill over the next day and a half. So the faculty in entomology are invited to meet with Bill at 1:15 today. And Brian Ockema is the contact for that. Staff in the department invited to meet with Bill at 3 p.m. today, and Sabrina is coordinating that. And then tomorrow, the students are invited to have lunch with Bill, and Edwin's coordinating that. So please do take advantage of every opportunity. And thank you very much for being here.